In the shadow of Zarmina's fractured skies, where the horizon bled into a tapestry of alien hues, Dr. Alara Vance and the Vraxi diplomat, Zorion, found themselves bound by fate and the cruel indifference of space. Alara, a seasoned envoy of the United Earth Coalition, had walked the polished halls of interstellar diplomacy with a grace that belied the steel in her spine. Her expertise in exobiology and linguistics had made her an asset in negotiations with several non-human species. Yet nothing in her extensive career had prepared her for the raw, untamed vistas of Zarmina or for the companion fate had thrust upon her. Zorion was of the Vraxi, a species known for their enigmatic ways and chameleon-like ability to adapt. His features were a curious blend of the familiar and the alien, eyes a deep, shimmering violet, skin the soft silver of a dying star, and limbs that moved with a fluid, almost hypnotic grace. His people were known in the galaxy for their diplomatic acumen, a trait that, under normal circumstances, would have made him an ally, not a fellow castaway. The diplomatic mission had been straightforward: establish a formal dialogue with the Vraxi on their home planet, a task deemed routine by the Coalition. However, as their transport skimmed the outer reaches of Zarmina's atmosphere, a violent solar storm, a common but unpredictable menace in this quadrant, had torn through their vessel like a cosmic knife. The crash had been a maelstrom of screaming metal and shattering glass. Alara remembered the desperate efforts of their pilot, his face set in grim determination, before the world exploded into darkness. When she awoke, it was to the infinity of Zarmina's sky, painted in violent purples and inky blacks, the wreckage of their ship a smoldering carcass in the alien landscape. Beside her, Zorion stirred, his violet eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and relief. "We are alone," Zorion had said, his voice a melody that carried the strange accent of his people. The pilot. Alara had found the man, his life extinguished by the violence of their descent. They buried him under the twin moons of Zarmina, a silent vigil held in the twilight of this strange world. As days melted into weeks, the unlikely pair faced the reality of their situation. Zarmina was a planet of endless paradoxes, its beauty a stark contrast to the dangers it harbored. The atmosphere, rich in argon and neon, created a perpetual barrier, rendering their distress signals useless, and their hopes for rescue a distant dream. Alara and Zorion worked together to salvage what they could from the wreckage. The initial awkwardness gave way to a grudging respect, and then, as the Zarminian suns dipped below the horizon each night, to something deeper. Zorion taught Alara the basics of his language, the fluid syllables like music to her ears. She, in turn, shared stories of Earth, of oceans wide and deserts vast, her words painting pictures in the alien air. One evening, as they sat watching the sky burn with the light of Zarmina's twin stars, Zorion spoke of his home. "My world is not so different from yours," he said, his hand gesturing to the stars. "We too have seas and mountains, but our skies, they sing with the light of the cosmos." Alara found herself drawn to him, this being who was both so alien and so familiar. His touch was gentle, his gaze intense as if he saw beyond her skin, to the very essence of her being. It was inevitable, perhaps, that their bond would deepen, forged in the crucible of shared adversity. One night, as the auroras danced like spirits in the sky, they crossed the last frontier of their loneliness, finding solace in each other's arms. Weeks turned into months, and Alara noticed the changes within her. At first, she attributed the symptoms to the stress of their situation, but as time passed, the truth became undeniable. She was pregnant. The revelation shook her. Human and Vraxi biology were thought to be incompatible, yet here she was, carrying a child that was a testament to their union. "Zorion," she whispered one night, her voice trembling with a cocktail of fear and wonder. We are going to have a child." Zorion's reaction was one of profound awe. His people, for all their adaptability, rarely interbred with other species. "This child," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "will be a bridge between our worlds, a symbol of hope." As Alara's belly grew, so did their preparations. They built a home from the wreckage of their ship, a shelter against Zarmina's harsh elements. It wasn't much, but it did the trick. They learned to harvest the planet's flora. They hadn't seen much of the bigger wildlife yet, but Zorion knew something was out there. As they adapted to life on Zarmina, Alara and Zorion tried to live in the remnants of their shattered spacecraft. The structure was sturdy, composed of metal panels and composite materials, offering them a refuge against the planet's volatile weather. However, as they settled into this new life, and with the revelation of their unexpected child, it became clear that their current shelter would not suffice for the long term, especially now that they were to become 3, and needed something a bit more permanent. Zorion, despite his usually vigilant nature, found himself ensnared in a web of distraction and wonder at the prospect of fatherhood. His species, the Vraxi, were known for their keen senses and alertness, traits that had been honed over centuries of evolution on a planet where danger lurked in every shadow. However, the whispers of a human and Vraxi child, a rarity he had only heard of in hushed tones back home, occupied his thoughts, dulling his usual perceptiveness. This lapse did not go unnoticed by the local fauna of Zarmina. A large predatory beast, with scales that shimmered like the night sky and eyes that burned a fierce red, had been stalking the pair for days. It was a creature of stealth and deadly intent, drawn to the scent of new life and the warmth of their makeshift home. One evening, as the twin suns of Zarmina dipped beneath the horizon, casting long shadows over the land, the beast struck. It emerged from the undergrowth with a ferocity that split the silence, its claws poised to kill. Alara, caught off guard, stumbled back, her eyes wide with terror. Zorion, though distracted, reacted with the ingrained instincts of his military training. He was on his feet in an instant, the makeshift knife, a relic from the wreckage, firmly in his grasp. The beast lunged, its jaws snapping with the force of a vice. Zorion ducked, feeling the rush of air as the creature's teeth grazed the top of his head. He rolled to the side, the movements fluid yet precise, and plunged the knife into the beast's underbelly. The fight was brutal and short. Zorion, with a combination of agility and raw strength, maneuvered around the beast, his blade finding purchase in the soft spots of its scales. With a final, desperate cry, the creature collapsed, its lifeblood seeping into the alien soil. Breathing heavily, Zorion wiped the blade on the grass, his violet eyes meeting Alara's. In them, she saw not just the warrior but the vulnerability of a man who had nearly lost everything in a moment of unforeseen danger. "We need a stronger shelter," Alara said after a moment, her voice steady despite the shaking of her hands. This was too close. Zorion nodded, the gravity of the situation settling over him. "You're right. We've been thinking of comfort, not safety. It's time we use all the resources Zarmina has to offer." Together they approached the fallen beast. The creature was large, its flesh surprisingly tender under the tough, starry scales. With a mix of curiosity and necessity, they cooked the meat over an open fire, the aroma rich and enticing. To their surprise, the taste was delicious, a blend of flavors that reminded Alara of game meat from Earth, but with a richness that was unique to Zarmina. As they ate, they planned, their conversation turning from the immediate needs to the future they needed to secure for their child. In the following days, Zorion and Alara ventured into the local forest, a sprawling expanse of towering trees with bark as hard as stone and leaves that shimmered with a metallic sheen. They cut the wood, Zorion's strength and Alara's guidance turning the task into a rhythm of progress. They chose a site closer to a freshwater stream, its waters clear and cold, teeming with fish that glittered like jewels. Here, they laid the foundations of their new home, a structure of stone and wood designed to withstand the predators and the elements of Zarmina. Zorion, with his detailed knowledge of Vraxi architecture, designed the shelter to be both functional and comforting. The walls were thick, made of the interlocking logs from the forest, reinforced with stones that Alara shaped using tools forged from the spacecraft's wreckage. The roof was a masterpiece of engineering, layers of broad metal-type leaves over a lattice of wood providing insulation and protection. Inside, they crafted furniture from the same sturdy wood, their bed a soft nest of local fibers that Alara wove together by the light of Zarmina's moons. As the shelter took shape, so did their relationship, growing deeper with each shared challenge and success. They talked, laughed, and planned, their love a gentle flame that warmed them against the cold nights. Alara's pregnancy progressed, and with each passing day, Zorion grew more attentive, his love for her. As the moons of Zarmina cast their soft glow over the newly built shelter, Alara cradled the infant in her arms after a somewhat uneventful smooth birth. Marveling at the miracle of life that she and Zorion had created together, they named their daughter Elrion. She, a blend of human and Vraxi traits, was unlike any newborn either species had ever seen. At birth, she was no larger than the size of a human thumb, her skin shimmering with a delicate iridescence reminiscent of Zorion's people, while her eyes held the deep oceanic blue of Alara's earthly heritage. The child's growth was astonishing, a phenomenon they attributed to Zarmina's unique environmental properties. Within just a few days, it had grown to the size of a typical human newborn, yet it exhibited agility and awareness far beyond her apparent age. Alara watched, fascinated and a little apprehensive, as the baby's fingers grasped at the air with purpose and intelligence. While the small family adjusted to their new life, the tranquility of their existence was shattered by the same harbinger of chaos that had brought them together. A crashing space shuttle, tearing through the atmosphere, its fiery descent a bright scar across Zarmina's sky. Alara's heart leapt into her throat as she witnessed the crash, the echoes of their own harrowing arrival resounding in her memory. With Zorion's quick, reassuring kiss on her forehead and a promise to return, he grabbed his makeshift spear, a relic of their earlier encounter with the Zarminian predator, and set out towards the new wreckage. Alara watched him go, their daughter nestled against her chest, its tiny fingers curling around one of her own. The world outside seemed to hold its breath, the usual night sounds of Zarmina hushed under the weight of unfolding events. Zorion moved with a blend of caution and speed, his senses heightened to every rustle in the undergrowth and every shift in the wind. As he neared the crash site, he noticed the debris scattered across the landscape, eerily similar to the aftermath of their own crash. His heart pounded with a mix of fear and hope. Were there survivors? Could they finally be rescued? He approached the smoldering remains, the air thick with the acrid scent of burning metal and scorched earth. The ship was larger than the one that had brought him and Alara to Zarmina, its design unfamiliar but clearly advanced. As he circled the wreckage, Zorion's eyes caught movement. He paused, every muscle tensed for action. From the shadows of the twisted metal, a figure emerged, staggering, covered in soot and blood. Zorion raised his spear, ready to defend himself, but the figure collapsed, coughing violently. It was a human, or at least, mostly human. The man's uniform bore the insignia of a coalition not known to Zorion, a faction of humanity far beyond the reaches of the United Earth Coalition. "Help me!" the stranger rasped, his voice a guttural mix of pain and desperation. Zorion, ever the diplomat even in the face of the unknown, lowered his weapon slightly. "I am Zorion of the Vraxi," he introduced, his voice steady. "You are on Zarmina. How did you come to be here?" The man's eyes widened in recognition at the mention of Zarmina, a name known across the stars as a graveyard of ships due to its atmospheric anomalies. "We were explorers, scientists," the man managed to say between labored breaths. "We heard rumors, a human and a Vraxi living here. We wanted to know how." Zorion's mind raced. They had been subjects of curiosity then. Their survival had turned them into a beacon for those daring enough to explore the unexplored. "Can you walk?" Zorion asked, offering his hand. The man nodded weakly, accepting the help with a groan of pain. As they began their trek back to the shelter, Zorion's thoughts were with Alara and their child. What did this new arrival mean for them? Was this the beginning of their rescue, or the start of something more complicated? Back at the shelter, Alara sensed the change in the air. The baby, too, seemed to react, its eyes wide and alert. She stood at the threshold, her gaze fixed on the path Zorion had taken, waiting for him to reappear. As the two figures emerged from the darkness, her heart skipped a beat. Zorion, with a survivor in tow, was a sight that offered both relief and new worries. Who was this stranger? What was their purpose, and what could their arrival mean for their future? Zorion met her eyes, a silent conversation passing between them. There was so much to explain, so many potential paths their lives could take from this moment on. As they helped the newcomer into their home, Alara's eyes widened as she recognized his uniform, and an internal battle rage within, as to tell Zorion who this man really was. For now she would let things be as the newcomer didn't recognize her. As the twin suns of Zarmina set once more, Their arrival in the morning would bring a new host of questions and no clear answers.